Are we rolling now? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. So today we are going to talk about CHIRP, which is this open source software that allows you to program your radio. The way I learned about CHIRP was I got my first two radios. This is long before I became a licensed ham. I just got them as walkie-talkies. And I was trying to, just reading reviews, and a number of people had said, CHIRP is your friend, CHIRP is your friend. So I kind of looked it up, and somewhere I found a product on Amazon that this cable is what you need to hook up your radio to the computer, and then CHIRP can program your radio. Oh, 1 second. So even before I learned how to manually program my radio, I actually learned how to program it in CHIRP. So I kind of took the shortcut first and then learned how to program the radio much later on. So before I get into CHIRP, let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you can go on Google and just type in the word CHIRP. I think there is some software for music or something like that that also has the same name. But if you type in, excuse me, CHIRP and then say radio software, then you'll definitely hit the right link. So you just click on this link and you get to the CHIRP website. Right off the bat, if you notice, you can use it on Windows, Macintosh, or on Linux if you are a Linux user. I'm assuming that most folks will typically not want the source code, but if you do want the source code, you can get that too for CHIRP. The first thing that strikes you is the number of different radio models that CHIRP supports. It's a staggering number. And not only are all these radios supported, if somebody does have a new product out there and the manufacturer wants that product to have become CHIRP compatible, they offer you information on how to go about getting that. So if you read this line, if you're a vendor and want to have your radio supported by CHIRP, please see information for vendors.
Baji?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Toby here, but I don't know if it's just me, but I can't read the screen at all.
It's fuzzy.
Yeah, it's blurry.
I can't make it out.
Okay. So let's see how I do this correctly. Jane, are you aware of any?
No, I
know what's going on. Okay, give me 1 second, guys.
Yeah, I was playing around. I couldn't do anything on this end.
Okay, can you guys see it better now?
You have to wait 1 second.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Much better.
Okay, so that was my fault. So when I shared my screen, there is an option that says optimize your screen for video recording or something like that. And I had clicked that on.
Oh.
So apparently that was a mistake. So let's not worry about that sound that's coming in. Please apologize. It's somebody trying to call me on the internet. It's probably a junk call. Shoot, 1 second. Okay, it's gone now. So can you see it better now?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
So right here, supported radio models, and I'm going to actually enlarge the screen a little bit so you don't have to struggle as much. There is a very large number of manufacturers and models that are supported. And anything that's not supported today, if it is a radio that is getting good traction, and if enough people are asking for it, it will be supported soon. Okay. So by using CHIRP, one of the advantages is, let's say you have 2 or 3 different types of radios. Maybe you have an HT. I myself have never used CHIRP on base stations or mobile radios, but I believe it is compatible with several of those as well. So if you have a band plan, like if you have certain channels programmed to certain repeaters, you can basically have the same channel numbers programmed between your mobile radio, base station, and HT if you're using CHIRP. And no matter if the 3 radios are made by different manufacturers, you can use the same image to flash all 3 radios. Okay. All right. So enough about that. So now I'm going to switch to my camera for a quick second to show you something that I'm sure all of you are already familiar with, how to hook up CHIRP to your radio. Stop sharing. And you might have to click on my image so you can see what I'm showing you on the camera. So I have a radio and there's a cable hooked up to its, the speaker and microphone port. And the other end of the radio, or the other end of the cable, it's a USB connector. And this is what's going to go into the laptop. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I don't know if you could hear that sound, but when I connect that cable, Windows detects the cable and basically assigns a COM port to it. These cables are what they convert the USB port into one of the COM ports, which is the traditional communication port that's been in the PCs for a very long time. A word about cables. You can spend as little as $10 to get some kind of a cheap Chinese cable, and sometimes, or I should say, in many cases, they'll work fine, at least when you get started. Or you can get better quality cable, and some of those cables might be compatible with many different radios. When I got my first 2 walkie-talkies back then, I just found something on Amazon and just ordered it. As I bought other models of radios, some of them shipped with their own cable, and that was kind of nice. So the more expensive radios might actually ship a cable with the radio, and usually that likely will be CHIRP compatible. Okay. So you plug in the cable, and then now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Are we still seeing okay?
Yes.
Yes.
And I have a CHIRP on my taskbar. If you see the little VGA connector icon, that's their icon. But I think I also have it on my desktop. Okay, so CHIRP is up now, and I'm turning on my radio. The instructions say that it should be on frequency mode, but I don't think I've had trouble programming the radio, even if it was on channel mode. So VFO mode or channel mode seems to work just fine. Okay, so the first thing to do when you have it hooked up is just to make sure that the CHIRP software is able to connect to the radio and get the information, because you cannot program the radio if you cannot read the radio to begin with. So I go over to radio and I say download from radio. Okay, and it'll pop up the parameters. Some of you might see multiple COM port options. In the case of my installation, there is no actual physical COM port. There's only one communication port, and that's established when the driver is activated. It's COM4. You pick the make and the model, and as you can see, you have all these different manufacturers. Okay. And then you pick the model and you say, okay. Here, this is where you get any special instructions that are specific to your type of radio. I click OK. And now it's reading from my radio, and the light on the radio is flashing. Okay. So, we have all the information that was read from the radio. This table basically looks like a spreadsheet, and it is actually a spreadsheet. You have all these different columns. You can click on the help article here and read what each of these columns mean. But as folks that have been programming radios for a long time, none of these will look strange to you. Some of these columns are multifunctional depending on what mode you're using, whether it's in the repeater mode or simplex mode and stuff like that. And then there are a few parameters in the case of my HT, or in the case of this HT, that are not available from the radio interface itself. That is, you cannot access that feature if you were to manually program the radio, but because of CHIRP, you're able to do that. And as an example, one of them is the skip column. Okay. So what that does is, it allows you to skip this channel when you do a channel scan on this radio. Okay. I'm going to pause here. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Baji, how do I change anything on the spreadsheet? Let's say I wanted to change a tone. How would I do that?
Okay. So let's take channel number 7, okay, N8OND. Okay, so you just want to change the tone. Do you want to change the receive tone or the send tone? Send tone. Okay, so you just pick a new tone value, and then you pick the new value, but it has to be written back to the radio. We haven't done that yet. Okay, so once the value is changed, I go back to the radio. I can say upload to radio, and I'm not going to click OK, but after that, it'll write it back to the radio. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so any of these cells that I would click on, there would be a drop-down box to allow me to choose something else. Is that correct?
Yes. All of
Okay.
them have drop-down lists. Only the frequency, I believe, and the offset are the two places where you can actually edit the values. Pretty much everything.
I think, Baji, only the tone and the whether it's duplex or simplex or positive or negative, I think those are the ones that have drop-down menus and possibly offset.
Yeah, the offset is, you can put in any offset, even though, I mean, it's 0.6 or 5 usually for UHF, VHF. There is, nothing written in as such that it cannot be something else, right?
Yeah, you can put anything in there, but I think only the tone and the whether it's positive or negative or none are the only drop-down menus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I
'Cause
got it. Thank you.
Those
Thank
are
you.
like fixed.
Thanks, Baji.
Those are like fixed things. It's got to be one of those tones.
Right.
So they rather than figure, well, what's the tone here? They give you a list. You just pick it and click it, and you're good to go.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. Baji. Thank you.
Sure. So another one of these things that sometimes radios don't give you the feature where you can put in a channel name. You have to go only by channel number. And you can program the channel name using CHIRP. Depending on your radio model, this length of the name varies. I have, I think, some HDs that accept 6 or 7 characters and others that only accept 5. Okay. So this is the regular screen where you're going to put in the channel numbers and all this stuff. So let's say that I was going to Florida this next month and I wanted to use my radios, but I need a different set of repeaters for Florida. So what I can do is I can open a different image. Okay, so on my radio or on my computer, I have multiple images. So it opened up a brand new tab, and then this has a different set of channels compared to the one that you were looking at before. Okay, and then I can just go up to radio and say upload to radio, and now voila, I have flashed a new image onto the radio. Okay. And then when I'm back from Florida, I can just open CHIRP, load back my Medina image and put that back on the radio. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute, and my radio is back for Medina. Any questions about that? Okay, now let's take a look at how to do some more, slightly more complex configurations in CHIRP. Jane, how long do these sessions usually go for?
I don't know, I guess an hour would be safe, but I mean, in terms of the Zoom parameters, I have the paid version, so you could go till the wee hours in the morning if you like.
Oh, no, I don't have that much to talk about. So one of the things that you can do, so let's say that there is a block of channels and you wanted to copy them to a different location. Okay. So let's say I wanted to delete a bunch of channels. So I click on one of them, just like in Excel, right? I can click on the end one, all of them are selected, and I can just hit the delete key and they're all wiped out. Okay. So next, let's say I want to move these channels up, the ones below, I want to move them up by 10 positions. Oh, it's been a while since I've done this. Okay, do you see the move up? Oh, it moved up by just one, so sorry. I want to move it up by 10 channels. So I'm going, oops. Oh, I can just do cut and paste. So I can do cut. And go up here and do paste. Okay. What I should probably have done is copy, delete, and then paste so that the old positions were, were made blank. But nonetheless, I can just go in and, manually delete them.
Baji, can you sort the columns by frequency or name?
Yes. Okay, so I just clicked on frequency and it sorted the column by frequency. Okay. Okay, now I want to show you some nice stuff that you can do with CHIRP that you actually cannot, I think, maybe you can do it with the manufacturer's software as well, but certainly not from the from manually programming the HT itself. So when I first got my two radios, which shall remain nameless, I used to increase the squelch all the way up to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but it didn't seem to make any difference. I would constantly have the radio start receiving basically noise. So I asked a few people, I said, hey, why is it that no matter how high I put the squelch, the radio seems to give out a lot of noise? And they told me, well, it's a cheap radio, so the front end of the radio is wide open. So because of that, you're getting all this noise and there's no way to stop it. So I kind of, assumed because a number of people had said that to me. So I assumed, that's the reason. So one day I was just playing around and ran into this setting, okay? And basically, it allows you to control what, so the radio has squelch from 0 through 9. This screen allows you to control what that squelch actually does. So I did some research on the internet, and it turns out that this particular radio allows you to have a actual squelch least count 0 to 127. Okay, but once you hit 100, pretty much that's as good as completely cutting off the incoming signal unless it's very, very strong. So this manufacturer, it so happens, does a very poor job of setting the default squelch values correctly. So squelch 0 is like 0. Squelch 1 through 9 only goes from a value of something like 20 to about 40. Whereas the radio itself is capable of a squelch value all the way to 128 or 127. So what I did was instead of having 20 through 40 for these VHF squelches, I changed it to 10, 11, 22, 33, 44, and so on up to 99. Once I set it to squelch 9 now, nothing gets through, almost nothing gets through. Maybe if you have another HT that's a few feet away sending a simplex signal, it might open the squelch, otherwise it won't. So it turns out that basically it was the manufacturer's poor job of setting default squelch values that was causing the problem, and not so much the front end of the radio. Okay, so just showing you how I would do this. So I hit the tab key, it goes to the next field. I mean, there's not much difference between 33 and 30. Okay, so there you have it. So you're basically able to customize what each squelch value. So on this radio, it's 0 through 9, but internally you're able to control how much that actually feeds into the signal processing chip. Okay, any questions about that? So there's a few other settings. So the power on message, over here, it allows you to control how long the light stays on when you're after you press any key, the backlight, how long it stays on, and the choice of colors for the backlight when you're receiving versus transmitting. Another one is battery saver. So 1 means basically the radio is on half the time, and then 1.4 gives you the maximum savings in terms of battery. So the signal has to last a little bit longer for the radio to come on when it's in 1.4. So the radio is kind of more in a standby mode. So it's basically a battery saving feature. Can somebody better explain that? I don't know if I. Okay. And then you have advanced settings.
Does this screen show up different for different radios? Or you have to know what the capabilities of the radio are to know which ones of these settings would work?
I'm not sure, Jane. I'm guessing that there is a like a universal set of settings, meaning like let's say that there is about 100 different settings, and depending on which of those settings your radio supports, those will appear in the settings menu, and the other features that are not supported for your radio, those won't show up.
Jane, I believe that they're custom. There is a lot of custom programmability for a lot of radios in here, which is really the advantage of this program. As far as the competition for this, Baji, it's this for free, or you can buy RT systems for $45, which will do one radio. And I don't know what else is out there on the market right now. This, you showed the list. It does what, a couple hundred different radios?
Correct, and some of their variants too. Yeah.
So, let me tell you my experience with it. I've got an FT817, that little Yaesu 5-watt all-band, shack in the box. I bought it about 6-7 years ago, and it has the 5 60-meter channels in it, which I haven't even used yet. But a couple of years later, the FCC changed, I think, channel 2 to a different frequency. So even though you can program frequencies in the Yaesu, those 5 frequencies were programmed in a read-only fashion, and you couldn't get in there and change them. So I bought the RT system package for $45, and that wouldn't let me change them. And Yaesu didn't have any firmware upgrades to change them. So for the heck of it, I did a search to find out how you could change that one channel. And it come up and says CHIRP can do it. So downloaded CHIRP. It's right there in the middle of your screen, FT817ND. And it gave me the ability to overwrite those read-only, those 5 channels. So I was able to fix the one. So I think what these guys do is they dig in a little deeper than what RT systems or any kind of programming that the manufacturer gives you. A lot of times the manufacturer don't want to let you into certain places. These guys, I think, give you more options. You can probably get in more trouble that way, but if you know what you're doing. So anyway, this CHIRP bailed me out of a problem on FT817, and where nothing else would.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Has anybody programmed a mobile or base radio using CHIRP? I'd like to know, because I haven't done that yet.
Yes, they're using the 817.
Okay.
And it's pretty much the way you just showed it. I've got a new radio here, an FT991, which is not on the list yet. So I had to use RT systems. The only advantage with some of the newer radios now, you don't have to buy the RT systems cable. You can download the software for half price for $24. What's nice about some of the new radios, they've got built-in sound cards, and it just takes a standard USB cable instead of some special cable. So yeah, the answer is yes. It's very easy to do a mobile. And if anybody ever programmed this manually using the controls on the radio, it takes you all day. This stuff here makes it so easy. But what do you see there about FT991?
It seems to be something that they're working on.
Okay. Well, you mentioned before the new stuff. I mean, that radio's been out a while, but the 991A is fairly new. And I'm not sure they get much cooperation out of the manufacturers. They probably have to reverse engineer it.
Well, most of these manufacturers, they've been manufacturing these, radios for a long time, so they tend to follow a certain discipline. It's sort of like, if you've been working on Ford engines for a long time, yeah, there will be newer models and a lot of new, enhancements, but the core Ford engineers probably follow a similar methodology. So that's probably what this guy uses, as a starting point.
But if you're going to program 50, 60 or more channels on a radio, this is the way to go. Trying to do it by rotating the knob and pushing buttons, it's too easy to make mistakes. It drives you crazy. This is really, anybody that has a VHF, UHF radio should have this.
Mm-hmm. And even though it's this, your radio or the FT 991 is not on the official list, that doesn't mean that somebody hasn't actually already found a way to, program it using CHIRP. You should reach out to this guy and find out, and he'll probably, or somebody will give instructions on how to go about that. One second, let me see. So this is a more recent post, December 2nd of 2020. The recommendation is to buy RT systems.
And at least RT Systems is half price for that radio because it takes a standard USB cable. RT Systems is expensive if you have to order the cable and they send you the disc. It's $45 plus shipping.
Okay.
If you don't need the cable, you can download RT Systems for the $24, but it only works on one radio. You got 5 radios, you got to pay. You got 5 downloads, 5 times 24. That's the beauty of CHIRP, is they do all these radios and they do a lot of detail.
Well, even if you have RT systems, it still makes sense to get CHIRP, because let's say that you programmed one radio using RT systems and it happens to be CHIRP compatible. You can take the image off that radio and then put that on a different radio for which you did not buy RT systems, but are able to use CHIRP.
Yeah. Plus, CHIRP fixed that FT817 problem that RT Systems didn't. That was a real bonus that it accessed some areas of memory that RT Systems wouldn't let you do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm quickly going through these other settings. Most of them are, I think, fairly obscure. Oh, this is, you remember the time when there was an announcement that the Baofangs are going to become illegal because they're able to access frequencies outside the amateur bands. One of the ways that you can, make sure that your Baofeng will stay within the permitted bands is there is this VHF lower limit. If you change that to 144 and change this to, what is it, 148?
8.
No.
Yeah. 8.
Okay. And this one from 420 to 450, is it?
Yes.
There you go. And you save this. You cannot access non-amateur frequencies if you save this into the radio. Now, obviously, this is self-policing versus the manufacturer creating a product that is in compliance with, being a ham or part, what is it, part 97 item or something like that?
I think so.
Okay. Work mode settings allows you to pick and choose, wide and narrow band default. But going back to the memories, that is also, present in the, sorry here. So there is FM and narrow FM. So FM is wide FM and NFM is the narrow FM. 6.25 versus 12.5 channels. Excuse me. And then this is not a big deal. And the DTMF tones. So
No, you mentioned that, Baji, you mentioned that narrow FM. We have a suspicion that some people have their radios that are programmed for M2M's repeater, that by accident they've got narrow FM in there. And that's why they're so weak when their audio is so low.
Huh.
That's, you don't want to use 6.25 on our repeater. There are some that you need it, but you want standard FM on our 14703. We think that some people are on narrow FM, or there are radios out there that won't give them the older wide FM, which is still legal for amateur.
I see.
So
Are you sure that the repeater will actually open up if you transmit in narrow FM?
I believe it will, but all it does, it lowers your deviation.
Okay.
And if your deviation is low, then the audio that we hear is going to be low.
It happened a while back, Ed. I was going on a pumpkin patrol, and I don't know what got into my head. So I programmed all the channels with narrow FM that day. And I, without thinking of, without even testing them, and I went on the road, and maybe it wasn't pumpkin patrol. I think it was, I was attending a meeting in Lorain County, one of the club meetings there. And I would key up, and none of the repeaters would, open the squelch for me.
Okay, what could happen, if you cut your deviation in half, you're also going to cut your tone deviation in half. And maybe because you cut your tone in half, you weren't transmitting enough tone to open the repeater. That's would be my suspicion there.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was obviously picking up the, others talking just fine, but I just could not get into the repeater. So I knew right away that that was a mistake.
Yeah, most of the repeaters around here take the standard FM. And you wouldn't want to use standard FM on a narrowband repeater because you'd overmodulate and you'd probably be chopping in and out. So I'm not sure if there are the real narrow ones in this area. So
what is the downside to people using narrow FM? Is it the audio fidelity or what?
It's just the volume. They're going to sound quieter because they cut the deviation in half. I think you got plus or minus 2.5 kilohertz instead of plus or minus 5. And the higher the deviation, the louder you're going to sound up until you exceed 5, and then you'll start having trouble with the receiver. So when anybody sounds far away, they might be on narrow.
Okay.
Just, not static. It sounds like they're talking out here, that they're 2 foot away from the microphone.
Right. Yeah, I'll give that a try someday and see if I can get into M2M through the narrow.
Yeah, and talk to somebody, and they should tell you, well, your audio is low on narrow and it's okay on normal. I would think that you would still send enough tone to trip the repeater, but try it out sometime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, so that's pretty much all I have in terms of showing you the CHIRP features. Basically, it's just 2 screens. One is the actual list of frequencies that you can import and export. You can also export in other formats, like actually you can save it as a CSV file, which is an Excel compatible file. Or you can save it as, a radio image, which actually contains not only the frequencies, channel names, and all those things, but also the other information like the squelch levels and power on settings and stuff like that. So let's open it up for any questions.
Baji, I had one other thing that everybody should know, that when they're writing to the radio or reading from the radio, make sure they don't lose power to the radio or to the computer or lose connection on that data cable. That does bad things to the radio. Sometimes that radio is going to lock up and you can't recover. So be really careful during the read and write sequences.
Okay, yeah, I haven't run into that problem, but I will take that precaution. So what I would suggest is, if you're going to do some programming, read from the radio, then go ahead and unplug the cable, turn off your radio, do whatever you want to do with the frequencies and the names and tones and everything. And when you're ready to write it back, then, connect the radio back on and, send it out, because that will reduce the chance of a power outage.
Yeah. If you do this with a laptop, you have a battery backup in the laptop. So if you lose line power, same thing. If you have your radio on a power supply and it loses power, you'd be better off to have the radio on a battery, so that you don't. Battery backup is a good thing if you're doing a lot of radio programming.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, that was really interesting, Baji. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to be playing around with it.